All right, everybody, if you are all set, our timer is ready. And I didn't change clothes. There's just an air conditioning vent blowing straight on me, so it's cowboys, sorry. Okay. Thank you, thank you. They didn't do anything, so I think I'm okay. Wendell has been very patient. Thank you, Wendell. Thank you, thank you. All right, Wendell, before I give you each question, I will tell you how long your answer can be, and Scott will then be the timer and let you know when your time is up. Okay, are you ready?
Ready.
All right, Wendell Bailey, you have 1 minute to answer this question. Which political leader from the past 50 years, other than Ronald Reagan, do you see as a role model?
Ronald Reagan. Can't do that. We had some very significant political leaders when I was in Congress. Phil Graham comes to mind quickly with this because he began as a conservative Democrat and voted with Ronald Reagan on the Reagan Revolution, where we cut taxes and cut spending. The Democrats kicked him out of their caucus. He could have just walked over to the Republican side of the aisle and been a Republican that easily. But instead, he resigned from the United States Congress and went home and ran as a Republican, and the voters voted him right back into the Congress.
Right. 1 minute for your answer on this one, please, Wendell. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in our district?
Well, you have to have coalitions and building coalitions. One of the real coalitions is called the Rural Caucus, and it's principally concerned with rural issues. And I think that's one of the significant problems that we have in America's today, flyover society. So you join with other people that think like you think. And we, as I said in my opening remark, believe in cutting taxes and cutting spending. And so I would join with coalitions of people who thought like that.
Okay, thank you. 2 minutes for this answer, Wendell. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what would your approach be to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with our current budget crisis?
Well, we have, of course, vulnerability to tornadoes and also earthquakes here. But we also have another pending disaster, and that is when our national budget can no longer even pay the interest on their bill. So FEMA or the Corps of Engineers will have to live the same as every other agency in the United States government, with perhaps a small cut, perhaps just a freeze on the amount of money they get. But nobody gets a free ride in this day and age with $3 trillion of debt added every year.
2 minutes for your answer on this question as well. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th of 2012, and please be specific?
Been there, done that. I worked with Farm Bureau in passing the farm legislation in the Reagan years. Now, there's always a conflict between some of the commodities and others. There's even a wintergreen mint subsidy. There's, of course, big subsidies or controls, if you want to use those words, on major products such as cotton and major commodities like that. Now, milk just came out of and under and escaped from by an extension of the existing Farm Bill for another year. So each of those groups have their own particular emphasis that they want in the United States Congress. Then, after you get to that, You generally have to follow the advice of an umbrella group such as Farm Bureau, and I think the world of the Farm Bureau Coalition. I think they do a good job of putting together the entire spectrum of agriculture. An unusual thing about this is that the cow-calf operators and the feeder pig operators of the swine industry don't get any subsidies. They're not part of the big USDA farm bill. And I always admire the cattlemen because they don't seem to want or they don't seem to need any federal intervention in the agriculture scheme. My buddy just bought 32 cows and paid almost $2,000 a pair for a cow-calf, so they're getting along okay.
All right, thank you. 2 minutes for your answer on this one, Wendell. How would you support economic development in our 8th district?
Oh, that's a terrific question. This is a poor district, a poor congressional district. The 10 counties that I live on the eastern end of this district are the 10 least educated and lowest income population in the state of Missouri. Now, those two things go together. Low incomes and low education. 27.5% of the babies that are born in Shannon County are born to mothers without a high school completion. We have to get these kids to stay in school for a high school completion, and we need to improve our vocational education system so that people can know how to make a living. Not everybody wants to go or should go to college, and we need to change that emphasis so that vocational education and staying in school mean a high priority for these children.
Wendell, this will be your final question. You will have 1 minute to answer it, okay?
Uh-oh.
Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, do you feel it's appropriate to compromise?
The time that I spent in Washington, D.C. was a time when we had a conservative agenda. Ronald Reagan won the presidency, and the people in the United States knew what he went there to do. Many times you heard him say, we're overspending, and we need to cut government. You've heard people say that the employment of the federal employees is not the problem, it's the private sector jobs that we need to grow. So you can compromise, but you can't compromise on your principles of going there with a conservative agenda, and that should never be done.
All right, Wendell, that is it for the questions, but you have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement whenever you're ready.
I hope that you will listen carefully to what I have to say. You have a fine field of candidates here tonight. Every one of them a fine person. And what I'm trying to tell these good Republicans, all of you, is that we should not be selecting the congressman for the next decade, for the next 10 years or 20 years. That's not what this committee is assigned to do. The legal aspects of this committee is you are to select a candidate to replace Joanne Emerson for the end of her term. Now, there are some people that believe that the duty is to pick somebody for the next 10 or 15 years. That's not the committee's job. That's the people of the 8th Congressional District's job. We need to have a level playing field primary without ordaining an incumbent that all of the other candidates will have to run against. That's my strong philosophy about where we are here today, and that's exactly why I'm in this race, is to carry that message forward to the people of the 8th District and of the state of Missouri. It's good for the Republican Party, it's good for the 8th District, and it's good for America. Thank you all very much for your consideration.
Wendell Bailey, thank you. Jason Smith will join us next at the podium. It's a good sign that everybody came back after the pandemonium of moving the cars. Everyone came back, that's awesome, appreciate it. Hi, Jason.
How are you?
I'm well, how are you, sir?
Wonderful.
I'll tell you how long you have for each answer before I pose the question, okay? All right, you have 1 minute for your first answer to this question. Which political leader from the past 50 years, other than Ronald Reagan, do you see as a role model?
That's a good one. Wow. I would have said Ronald Reagan. I'm sure everyone else would. You know, probably, maybe Dwight Eisenhower. That may be a little bit more than 50 years just because he's the last Republican to actually balance a budget. I'm not sure exactly if Dwight Eisenhower is
I don't know either.
late.
Sorry.
So,
All I know is he's dead.
yeah. So I'll say Dwight Eisenhower and hope that he's within that 50 years just because he's the last Republican president to actually balance the budget. Since we failed to balance the budget 51 out of the last 56 years, it's about time we balance the budget.
You started a debate out here, did you hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, he's not dead.
Uh-oh.
Okay. You have 1 minute to answer this question too, Jason. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
The most important thing is that we have to understand there's differences between all of us. Whether you're liberty-minded, whether you're a conservative constitutional Republican, whether you're a Tea Party Republican, whether you're the old order establishment, we're all Republicans. And that is the most important thing. We may disagree. You're never going to find anyone that you agree with 100% of the time. And we have to work together because the option, on the other hand, is definitely not good. And that's Obama, who's definitely leading our country down a complete disaster by using his executive power, just virtually violating every constitutional right that we have and obstructing the justice. But yeah, we need to work together regardless of our differences and find where we do agree and figure it out.
Jason,
we're all Republicans.
You'll have a full 2 minutes for your answer to this one. Given the 8th District vulnerability to natural disasters, what would be your approach to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with our current budget crisis?
Well, in regards to the Hurricane Sandy funds that was just passed, I understand that our country has to help out and protect the natural disasters. We've done that with Joplin here in the state of Missouri and also in the southeast Missouri with our flooding just here recently in the ice storms. But what we have to look at is the fact that Hurricane Sandy funds, I would have voted against it because there were over $15 billion of funds that went to poor projects, and it wasn't disaster relief. And that's the problem that's wrong with government. That's what people get upset with, is that they just need to vote yes or no on those projects instead of just adding pork to everything. The Farm Bill, for example, that became a multi-billion-dollar issue for food stamps. Not about farms, and that's why they kicked the can down 9 more months and hadn't even addressed that issue. That's the problem with Washington, D.C. That's why people can't stand it. They just won't address the single issues and just continue to negotiate their power of how much money they can get for this project, for that vote, and that's what we have to stop.
All right, and we'll have more from you on the Farm Bill here in just a moment.
Oh, wow.
You'll have a full 2 minutes for your next answer. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th of 2012?
What we need to do is reauthorize a farm bill that is actually a farm bill. Like I said, instead of a pet project for food stamp subsidies, virtually, over $80 billion was used in the farm bill for the food subsidies. We can save a lot of money with the farm bill, which I'm strongly pushing for, in getting away from the direct subsidies and actually going to crop insurance. That will save the state a lot of money. I'm not in Jeff City. Save the nation a lot of money. But that's the key. We got to stop looking at all these port projects, and we really need to address a lot of the issues with USDA and EPA that's affecting the farmers within the Farm Bill, and first start out by getting all the environmentalists out of the EPA and out of the Corps, and also all the animal rights activists out of the USDA. That's a great way to start with the Farm Bill.
They're yelling amen on that one.
Hallelujah.
Breaking rules.
Sorry.
Okay, 2 minutes for your answer on this question, Jason. How would you support economic development in the 8th District?
The first thing is to get government off our backs. Regulations is destroying family farmers. It's destroying small businesses throughout, whether it's deciding that children can't work on the farm under the labor regulations that they tried to impose last year. These are the problems that we had in the state of Missouri. I passed a bill just this past year in Missouri that required a systematic review process of all rules and regulations to check if those rules, do they cause an undue burden on businesses? Can it be more narrowly tailored to carry out the purpose? Is the rule obsolete? Is it beyond statutory authority? We need to do this at the federal level. There's over 170,000 pages of rules at the federal level. This is what's destroying America. It's destroying rural Missouri, and we have to do something about that. And we need to start taking and removing these regulations. We also need to pull the legislative authority away from these executive branches so that they have a fine scope and they cannot just promulgate anything that they want. EPA is doing that with cap and trade because we gave them broad authority. We did not pass cap and trade, but they try to implement it by the rule process. We need to pull their authority away so that the legislative body actually does their job and they're not lazy.
This is your last question, okay?
That's fast.
It is. You have 1 minute to answer. Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, is it appropriate to compromise?
You know, there's two defined things that we have to look at. You need to cooperate at all times. But compromising your core conservative principles is one thing that you don't do. I work with many folks in Jefferson City, and some of my close friends up there are Democrats who we disagree completely on. But you know what? I'm working on a bill right now, for example, for 5 years that I've been pushing through. You might have heard of it. It's a special filling vacancies in the offices of special elections. The governor vetoed it 2 years. The governor's office this week told me, Jason, I think we can support it. Because we found where he had problems with, and I've tried to fix it. It's something that I care adamantly about, even though it's not helping me in this situation. But I do believe it's going to become law, but you've got to cooperate, but not compromise. And stand your ground.
All right, Jason, you have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement whenever you're ready.
I just want to thank the pachyderms. I want to thank each and every one of the committee members and all the citizens throughout the district for coming here and allowing all of these 12 politicians to share their vision and ideas for Southeast Missouri. This is something that I have a passion for. I believe there's two types of politicians. There's ones that want to be something and ones that want to do something. Be something are the ones that care about a title or a leadership position. And I consider myself as one of those that want to do something. I want to go up into Washington, D.C. and make a difference. And if you guys choose to pick me and send me up there, I'll fight for our values. I will fight for rural Missouri and make sure they know where Southeast Missouri is. And I will do that until you all decide that that's not the place for me. So thank you very much, and great time.
Clint Tracy is our next candidate to take the podium. Hi, Clint. Clint, before I ask each question, I will let you know how long your answer can be, and a reminder that Scott is up front here to let you know when your time is up, okay? You're welcome. You have 1 minute to answer this first question. Which political leader from the past 50 years, besides Ronald Reagan, do you see as a role model?
Okay, thank you. Probably not just one. there's a couple that come to mind. Teddy Roosevelt is a personal favorite of mine, just because of his experience. He was a Rough Rider. The guy was a police chief in New York City, governor of New York, undersecretary of the Navy, which is a big points in my book. Had something to do with the Great White Fleet, sailing around the world and power projection. And besides that, he was clearly vice president and then president, and delivered a campaign speech with a bullet hole in his side. So I'd say Teddy Roosevelt.
He has a national park in my home state too. 1 minute for your answer on this one. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
Well, I don't think that the Republican tent can be too big. We've already got a pretty solid base here, but we need to reach out to folks maybe who aren't political and let them realize and try to educate people to realize that the scope of the debt that we're facing is quite serious. We need to do something about it. And so we need to reach out to everyone we can. Folks here, we need to reach out to your neighbors, your friends. We need to get as many people we can in the tent. So those are direct efforts. I think one of our fellow candidates who's maybe not participating at this point, Mr. Sotelo, there's a gentleman that has a passion in his heart and I think would be a great addition to the team.
All right, Clint, you have 2 minutes for your answer to this question. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what would be your approach for the funding of FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with our current budget crisis?
In my Naval Reserve job, we did a national level exercise a couple of years ago, and it was actually to practice at the national level what would happen if we had a federal earthquake here in the New Madrid Fault. And so going through that, it brought one thing to mind for sure was the disconnect between the federal government and our local governments. And that was really vivid to me as I went up to a map on the wall one day, and they had Camp Apache and Charlie and Delta and all these things on the map. And when I looked at the map, I said, well, that's Kennett, and that's Portageville, and that's Cape Girardeau, that's where I live. The west side, that's Salem, there's all these places, and they really have names, and there are people who live there, and they speak English, and they're pretty self-starting. I don't know that we need to send a whole lot of help from the federal government in there to help these folks, because we're pretty self-sufficient and industrious. But as far as how do we fund that, that's a good question. Maybe we need to look at providing a loan to the state, no interest loan. If you don't have money, it's hard to give money you don't have away, and it's really not fair to print more, reduce the value of the money that you do have. So I think I would look at some kind of a loan program, no interest over however many years, so you can get the relief in there that the folks need, but not penalize the rest of the country.
All right, Clint, 2 minutes for this answer. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th, 2012, and please be specific?
Okay. A lot of things going on in the Farm Bill. I think, my family and I was farmers. I've talked to folks down in the bill. The direct payments are, I think, an issue that we all need to address. I think crop insurance that program is good, and we should continue that. But let's make no mistake about it, 80% of the Farm Bill is eaten up with food stamps. That's pun intended. So we've got to look at every federal program. We've got to make important cuts across the board. There can't be any sacred cows. And we've got to take a hard look at the dollars that we have and how we're spending them. So that's what I would do.
2 minutes for your answer on this as well. How would you support economic development in the 8th District?
I think there's a couple things we can do. At the state level, we need to support right-to-work initiatives. We're at a competitive disadvantage with our bordering states, and again, that's a state level initiative, but I think at the federal level, our federal leaders can provide some guidance and leadership on that role. Economic development from the federal level, the best economic development is a JOB job, and it doesn't come from federal dollars. It comes from reducing and eliminating burdensome red tape on you folks, small business owners and the workers, to spark industriousness and ingenuity to create jobs. And as people get jobs, then they go off of the government assistance and they start becoming self-sufficient. So we've got to reduce the red tape, make it easier for people to create jobs, and make it rewarding for them to do so, and it's a win-win for both of us.
This is the last question. You'll have 1 minute for your answer. Clint, Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, do you feel it's appropriate to compromise?
Well, I think the problem is, up to this point, the conservatives have been compromising to the middle, and we've been losing too much ground. It's time that we stand firm, and maybe we need to push the meter over to the right a little bit to look at our fiscal condition and compromise. I agree, you have to have compromise to get things done, but not at the detriment of everybody else. We've gone through the fiscal cliff, so to speak, and we compromise, and what do we get? Higher taxes. Do we get any spending cuts? No. This country doesn't have a spending problem. I'm sorry, we do have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem. We have plenty of dollars that we bring into the Treasury. We are hemorrhaging in spending, so we have a spending problem that needs to be addressed, and to compromise, to do anything other than to cut spending and to cut government programs is disingenuous and sets our future generations up for not for success.
Okay, Clint, that is all of your questions, but you do have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement whenever you're ready.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight. It's great to see a crowded room full of like-minded folks. I'd like to thank the Pachyderm Club for hosting this forum. I want to thank the committee men and women who are putting a lot of time and effort into this process. I appreciate your dedication and your professionalism. It's been a pleasure to get to know you and speak with you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. I also want to thank my family who's here, and most importantly, my wife in the back, Carrie. Thank you. When I joined the Navy, I raised my right hand and I swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I fully expected and did get sent into harm's way to protect your freedom. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would come home and have to fight the federal government for that same freedom. But we do. And I will fight to protect the freedom that the Constitution guarantees every single one of us. So in that stead, I humbly ask for your vote and your support in that endeavor. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Todd Richardson will take the podium next. Hi, Todd.
Hi.
Before I ask the question, I'll tell you how long your answer could be, and Scott will remind you of how much time you have left and when it is over, okay? You have 1 minute for your first answer to your first question. Which political leader from the past 50 years besides Ronald Reagan do you see as a role model?
Well, I think for me, I look at young leaders that we have in Washington today as the role models for myself. I see young leaders like Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Eric Cantor, guys that are finally getting the discussion back to what it needs to be in Washington. They're focused on cutting spending and having real policy discussions about real issues.
Okay, thank you. You have 1 minute for your answer to this question as well. Making sure my timekeeper's caught up with me here. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in this district?
Well, I think it starts by recognizing the diversity of our party. And the one thing that I've learned in getting out and meeting with many of you on the committee is just how diverse our party is. This committee has people on it that span just about every part of the spectrum of Republican Party politics. We need to start focusing on what we agree on. And we need to start recognizing that if we don't, then we'll continue to lose elections. And we'll continue to get the result we've gotten out of Washington. Our problems are too great for us not to get serious about uniting as conservatives, getting behind our candidates when they win primaries, and making sure they win general elections.
Todd, this question, you have 2 minutes to answer.
Okay.
Given the 8th District vulnerability to natural disasters, What would be your approach to funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers with the current budget crisis?
Well, I think we've got to have a policy that provides some federal aid when we're affected by natural disasters. Clearly, we know firsthand here in southeast Missouri how devastating those disasters can be. From ice storms to floods to tornadoes, the 8th District has experienced, at least different parts of it, experienced all of those things within the last few years. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that the aid for that aid to be available, we've got to make sure that the aid packages are focused on providing that disaster relief. Congress just passed yesterday, I believe, $60 billion worth of aid for Hurricane Sandy. The problem with that is only $17 billion of that $60 billion actually went to victims of the storm. The other $43 billion was essentially assorted pork. That's indicative of everything that's wrong with Washington. It's the culture of spending. We have enough money to provide relief for natural disasters. We just have to be willing to prioritize it and leave the other stuff for another day.
2 minutes for your answer on this one as well. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which did expire September 30th of 2012? Be specific, please.
We need a long-term farm bill. It's absolutely ridiculous that Congress has not been able to pass a farm bill and get that renewed. It's critical to a number of places in our country, but most certainly here in the 8th District. You know, the people in the audience that are farmers or ranchers will understand this. But people involved in agriculture, it's the only industry I know of where you're a price taker on both ends. You've got to take the price for your input, and then you've got to take the price when you sell. And that means that farmers, more than anything, want certainty. And Congress's inability to pass a farm bill has done nothing but create uncertainty. I think if Congress will focus on getting the stuff that's not related to agriculture out of the farm bill, passing a long-term farm bill, giving farmers certainty, I think we'd be doing a better job in Washington than we've been doing certainly over the last year.
2 minutes also for your answer. How would you support economic development in the 8th District?
Well, we support economic development by getting government out of the way. And I don't think you're going to hear Republicans say anything different than that. Government, we know, cannot create jobs. What government can do is create the kind of healthy environment that promotes innovation and promotes investment. Unfortunately, right now, Washington is penalizing people who want to invest in our economy, penalizing people who want to invest. What we need to do to spur economic growth is we need to get our fiscal house in order. And that starts with cutting the spending. But we also need to be willing to consider serious and radical tax reform. We have one of the highest corporate income taxes of any country. We need to cut that corporate income tax, give people incentive to keep those businesses here rather than moving them overseas where they can pay sometimes as little as a third of the tax rate that we pay here in the United States.
Okay, Todd, this will be your last question. You'll have 1 minute for your answer.
Okay.
Washington seems to be in a gridlock, so when, if ever, do you feel it's appropriate to compromise?
Well, I don't feel like it's ever appropriate to compromise your principles. We need leaders who are willing to work with people from different backgrounds, different viewpoints, but we should never compromise our principles. Unfortunately, in Washington right now, Republicans haven't been standing by their principles. That's how we've gotten into the situation that we're in. And so when I'm given an opportunity to work with people who disagree with me, I'm happy to do so, as long as it doesn't require me to compromise those core principles.
Okay. That was your final question, but you do have 1.5 minutes for your closing statement when you're ready.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here tonight and suffering through now 11 of us, and I'm the last thing standing between you and the last candidate tonight. You know, to regain our country, we're going to have to start electing leaders. They're capable of convincing people that there's a better alternative than what we've been getting. That there's a better alternative to higher taxes, expanded welfare, and reams of regulation. We need to start electing leaders who can appeal to aspirations, who will remind Americans that a dynamic economy, one which rewards success and, yes, occasionally allows failure, is the surest and indeed the only way to preserve the American dream for generations to come. If you all will give me the incredible honor of representing you in Washington, D.C., I pledge to do three things. First, I will fight relentlessly for my constituents when dealing with the federal bureaucracy. Second, I won't get sucked into life in the Washington wasteland. I know where I came from, and I can promise you that I will never forget it. And third, I will preach a message of opportunity every chance I get. I'll appeal to the aspirations of young Americans so we can grow our base and ensure that this remains the greatest nation in the history of the world. If you're looking for a candidate with decades of experience, I'm clearly not your guy. But if you're looking for someone who will do his best to advance the conservative cause through a message of opportunity,
Time.
I would surely appreciate your vote.
Our final candidate tonight is Wayne Wallingford. Perfect. The hurricane is over. Awesome. I didn't mean them. I meant the wind that was blowing on me. I was freezing to death. Clarify. Hi, Wayne. Last
This
but
is
not least,
amazing.
they
I
say.
thought the room would be empty, but
It was at one point.
there's a lot of heads nodding off. I don't know.
Well, we'll get right into it
Okay.
then. Before I ask the question, Wayne, I'll let you know how long you have to answer it. To remind you that Scott will let you know when your time is up. He's right here in the front with the little sign, that threatening sign that he keeps thrusting in the air there. Your first question, you have 1 minute for your answer. Which political leader from the past 50 years, besides Ronald Reagan, do you see as a role model?
I think the political leader that I see as a role model is, and you didn't specify where from, I think Margaret Thatcher from England. I think she did a lot of the things that Ronald Reagan did. She brought England around to more of American-style open market, free market system, and she got along well with Ronald Reagan, which was very good. She also realized the power of the military to England and tried to get rid of a lot of the entitlement programs, and unfortunately, after she left office, they're worse than when she started.
Okay, thanks, Wayne. 1 minute for your answer to this as well. In what specific ways would you help to support and unite the Republican Party in our district?
Well, I think the Tea Party actually has helped do that right now, and even Ron Paul helped that with the Tea Party, because we need conservative people in Congress, and we've lost our way. Republicans have moved to the middle, more moderate, and we need to get back to Reagan-type conservatism, and I will help move the party to the far right, where we stand for a constitutional government based on Christian principles.
Okay, Wayne, 2 minutes for your answer on this one. Given the 8th District's vulnerability to natural disasters, what would be your approach of funding for FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers during our current budget crisis?
Well, I don't know if the Army Corps of Engineers need any funding. I hope they're not here. But I think they abuse a lot of their funding. In fact, we have 2 levees that need to be rebuilt, and I think I'd stop all funding for them until those levees do get rebuilt.
Okay. And for FEMA?
And for FEMA, they haven't done a very good job when Katrina hit, and I understand in New York, they've had a lot of issues, so I don't know. I think that whole system needs to be revamped. I wouldn't give them another dime until we got new leadership in those programs.
Okay. 2 minutes for your answer on this one as well, Wayne. What is your position on reauthorizing the 2008 Farm Bill, which expired September 30th of 2012, and we do need you to be specific?
Well, I wouldn't reauthorize that bill. I would go back to maybe 2004 levels. You know, that bill has a lot of things in it that need to be cleaned up. A lot of things from the Depression era are still in there. Also, unfortunately, most of the money goes to big commercial agricultural businesses. About 80% of the subsidies go to big agricultural people, where the small farmers making $10,000 to $249,000 only get maybe 24% of the subsidies. So we need to get back to our small farmers. Another thing I would tackle is the $75 billion food stamp program. I understand we need a safety net. However, the food stamp program has been growing for a long time now. In 2000, it was $17.1 billion. 2007 was already up to 26.3. I know we went into a recession in 2008. We understand more people going on food stamps. But now, after the recession, unemployment is down from about 9.6 to 8.2. But yet we have 30 million more people on the food stamp program, adding about 10,000 a day. I think Congress needs to look at that and see what's going on.
Okay. 2 minutes for your answer to this one as well, Dave. How would you support economic development in our 8th district?
Well, economic development is very important for job creation. First of all, we have to make sure there's a level playing field. I've seen too many times where government tries to pick winners and losers, and they're very good at picking losers. Government does not make a good venture capitalist. Now, you've all heard about the fiscal cliff. I can tell you about another cliff we're going to be going over, the regulatory cliff. We need to reduce regulations, particularly when it comes to the EPA, which I would cancel any money going to them and disband that organization, because the Dodd-Frank bill, President Obama conveniently left a lot of those things till after he got in office. There's 130 unmandated programs in there that's going to slow down economic development, and we need to work on that issue so that that doesn't happen. Also, the EPA has a mega deal for ozone. It's going to cost manufacturers and businesses $90 billion a year. You heard me right, $90 billion a year. Also, there's another mandate of theirs that they said 85% of the counties that they monitor will not meet the standards. And another point that they had that'll affect all of us, because I think everyone out there uses energy. I know we do in my household. $4.5 billion a year it'll affect. And you know what they said? By their own study, every dollar spent on that, you'll get a 3-cent return. That's not my idea of economic development.
This will be your last question. You'll have 1 minute to answer. If you want to learn more about the ozone, they'll be on my show the 28th. Tune that in. 1 minute for your final answer. Washington seems to be in gridlock. When, if ever, is it appropriate to compromise?
Well, we never compromise on our Christian principles and values, ever. We cannot compromise on ideas on how much should be spent where, but never on moral issues, ethical issues at all. We can compromise on what department should get how much money, where should we cut. And by the way, I wouldn't cut the Department of Defense anymore. They've already been cut by $400 billion under Robert Gates. So compromise is where you think someone should get $1, I think they should get $2, and we decide on $1.50, but never on moral principles or ethical values.
Okay, that was your final question, but you do have 1.5 minutes for a closing statement when you're ready.
Thank you. Well, my background, of course, is 20 years working for the 2 largest restaurant companies in the world. You're in my office right now. Also, my healthcare background, I have a master's degree in healthcare administration, and also was a professor of aerospace science at the university just down the street on Broadway. So I have a strong background there, but you want to remember that Barack Obama, in my opinion, one of his weakest areas, and we can discuss that all night long, there's so many of them, but was international relations, foreign policy, and his dealing with terrorism. If you think Al-Qaeda is dead, you better think again, because it's not. And the way it's mastatizing, I don't see any end in sight to terrorism, and our kill and capture operations will probably go on for another decade. Remember, we have 5 global military commands around the world. Over 1 million people, men and women, at arms on 4 continents. Carrier battle groups in every ocean. We have a military superiority. People need to understand the Department of Defense, where I worked for 25 years. People need to understand terrorism when I worked with NSA, the Pentagon, CIA, and DIA. And that's probably one of our weaknesses. We don't have many veterans in Congress, and so they don't focus on issues like international relations, foreign policy, and that's one of my areas of expertise. I look forward to meeting at the next forum, and I appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.